I live in a quiet, sun-baked corner of Arizona, in a neighborhood that looks peaceful from the outside. Rows of adobe-style homes, drought-tolerant landscaping, and cacti-lined sidewalks give it that sleepy desert charm. But don't let the scenery fool you. Our HOA is a beast, and at the heart of its chaos is a woman named Karen Forsyth. You know the type. Pearl white Lexus, aggressive sunglasses, and the personality of a paper shredder. She's the self-appointed compliance captain, though no one voted her in. She walks around with a clipboard, snapping photos of minor infractions like unmowed grass or a trash bin being 6 inches too visible. I'd mostly ignored her, until she parked on my property. It started innocently enough. One evening, I came home from my job as a civil engineer to find a white Lexus RX 350 parked half on the sidewalk, half on my decomposed granite front yard. I figured it was a delivery driver or maybe a guest who got confused. I waited. Nothing. By 9 p.m., it was still there. Next morning, still there. I called the tow company listed on the HOA website. "They won't touch it," the dispatcher said. "Private residential lot. We need written consent from the HOA president." I hung up and stormed down to the HOA office, a beige shack that looked like it was about to surrender to termites. Karen was there, smiling like she owned the planet. "Oh," she said, pretending to scroll through her phone, "that's my car. I parked it there because I'm repaving my driveway and we have strict rules against parking in the street during resurfacing. You understand, right?" No, I did not understand. "That's my yard," I said slowly. "You didn't ask permission." Karen looked at me with that faux sweet smile. "Well, it's all common area, technically. The HOA guidelines state that the easement from sidewalk to curb—" I cut her off. "That's not an easement. That's my lot. My deed has the survey line right to the sidewalk." "Oh, Idri," she chirped, "then sue me." And just like that, she sauntered away, clicking her fob and locking her Lexus. I didn't sue her, not right away. Instead, I started planning. Remember I said I'm a civil engineer? I've spent 15 years designing drainage, retaining walls, and erosion-resistant terrain for commercial developers. I know every zoning code and landscaping regulation in this county. If she wanted to play HOA hardball, I was going to out-regulation her. I went to the county office and pulled every zoning document for our neighborhood. I found gold. See, our HOA enforces a rule that driveways must remain clear during repaving, but my property had no such restriction. And better yet, the landscaping regulations state that homeowners could alter their front yards for aesthetic or water conservation purposes as long as it didn't violate stormwater runoff codes. I then applied for a landscape redesign. Not just any redesign, a moat. Now, I didn't call it a moat, of course. On paper, it was a decorative retention swale with dual-sided gabion support and xeriscaped border. Fancy language for a dry moat, 3 feet deep, 4 feet wide, filled with river rocks and cactus. County signed off. HOA, powerless. 3 weeks later, the crew arrived. I had orange cones, dig alerts, soil testing, the works. Karen waddled up the moment the first shovel hit dirt. "You can't do that," she shrieked. I handed her a copy of the permit. She scanned it, mouth twitching. This is outrageous. What is this?" "A water retention feature. It's drought season. County recommends it." She stared at the trench forming between the sidewalk and my home. "You're building a moat." I smiled. "A dry swale, actually, just enough to discourage tire damage. You wouldn't want to damage your Lexus, would you?" She screamed something about legal action and stormed off. The crew laughed. By sunset, the trench was complete. I installed steel rebar edging, filled the gap with 2 layers of polished stone, and placed ornamental barrels of cactus on the inside edge. It looked gorgeous and completely car-proof. No more Lexus. You'd think that was the end, but Karen, she didn't go quietly. The next morning, I found an HOA citation stuck to my door. Violation: hazardous landscaping impeding emergency access. I laughed. I had permits, photos, drainage diagrams. Still, I attended the next HOA meeting. Room was packed. Karen had stacked the room with her allies, mostly retirees she'd scared into submission. She stood at the podium, reading a prepared statement. Mr. Adler has created an unsafe barrier on his property that endangers the community's harmony, aesthetic cohesion, and emergency response capabilities. I waited until she was done and walked to the front, calm, confident. I have permits from the county, 2 soil engineer reports, and a letter from the fire department stating there's no violation. And I have something else. I held up a USB stick. Security camera footage. Karen has parked in 7 different neighbors' yards over the past 6 months. I've time-stamped it all. And I'm submitting it to the county ethics board. Because guess what? I turned to the crowd. She's not just the HOA president. She's the HOA's paid parking enforcement contractor. She's fining people, then using their property to dodge those same fines. The room exploded. Gasps, murmurs, someone shouted, "I knew it!"
Karen's face went white, then red, then somewhere between about to faint and about to explode. Karen was removed 2 weeks later in a special vote. An audit revealed she'd written herself over $12,000 in enforcement bonuses. Neighbors came together like never before. The new HOA board amended the rules. Property lines were respected, citations required photographic proof, and best of all, street parking was allowed again during driveway repairs. I kept the moat, added solar lights, a little footbridge, and a plaque. Private property, cars will be trapped. Karen moved out 6 months later. Rumor is she tried to run an HOA in another town, but someone forwarded my footage. The morning after the Reddit post blew up, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. First, it was local news. Then, it was a landscaping podcast. Then, Good Morning Tucson called and asked if I'd do a live segment from my engineering genius of a front yard. I laughed, politely declined. But things didn't quiet down. That weekend, I stepped outside to find 3 people taking selfies in front of the moat. A couple with a dog, a guy in a No HOA Zone t-shirt, and someone live streaming with a ring light. I tried to wave them off gently, but instead of leaving, they waved me over. "You're the guy with the HOA trench," one said. "Dude, you're a legend." I should have been annoyed, but honestly, it felt good. Even the neighbors came around. The same ones who used to quietly side with Karen now brought me cookies, beers, and compliments. One guy, Tom from 2 doors down, handed me a bottle of whiskey and said, "For what you did to her, respect." But of course, Karen wasn't done. About a month after the post went viral, I got a thick envelope in the mail. Certified letter. No return address, but I didn't need one. The second I saw the font on the paperwork, all caps with bold underlining, I knew. Karen was suing me. She claimed defamation, harassment, and loss of reputation. Her biggest complaint? That my moat made it physically dangerous for her to ever return to the neighborhood, citing emotional trauma associated with the landscaping. I didn't even need to hire a lawyer. Turns out, when she filed the suit, she didn't realize the HOA had recently conducted a full investigation into her misuse of funds and cited her for fraud. Her credibility was tanked. The judge dismissed it in 5 minutes. But before I left court, I leaned into her attorney's ear and said, calmly, "Tell your client, if she tries anything else, I've got drone footage." Because I did. Soon, people weren't just copying the idea, they were rebranding it. A TikTok creator coined the hashtag Moat March. A woman in Nevada built a rock trench around her RV lot to keep nosy neighbors out. A man in Texas added solar light spikes and posted a sign saying, "Karen-proofed." The trend took off. Articles were written. BuzzFeed called it landscaped rebellion. One homeowner in a gated community even painted their trench with little alligator heads. The headline read, "HOA tried to fine her for garden gnomes, so she installed a moat of doom." I couldn't help but smile. Months after all this began, the new HOA president, a soft-spoken retired teacher named Maggie, invited me to a community barbecue. She said, "I never got to thank you. You turned the tide." I looked around. Kids were playing, no clipboards, no passive-aggressive signs. People were happy. I said, "Funny, I didn't even want to start a movement." She smiled. Sometimes the best revolutions start with a shovel. The story almost ended there until one last thing happened. One morning, I opened my mailbox and found a small square envelope. No return address again, but this time the handwriting was careful, sincere. Inside was a folded note. "You were right. I got lost in power, in rules, in control. I forgot we're neighbors, not enemies. You made your point, and honestly, the moat is beautiful." It was signed N.Ps. Karen. I never saw her again, but I kept the note. Sometimes I frame it in my head like this: "The day the queen of the HOA surrendered." The moat is still there, lit up every night like a low-key landmark. People still slow down to take a look. And every time they ask, "Why would anyone dig a trench in their front yard?" I smile and say, "Because sometimes the only way to keep Karen out is with a little engineering."